Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the decision session for the Executive Member for Economy and Strategic Planning, which is me, Councillor Mason. We'll just take us through the agenda. So, declarations of interest, nothing that isn't already recorded. Minutes of the last meeting I'm happy with, so I'll sign those off. Thank you very much. Public participation, we've got three speakers. The first one is going to be on Zoom, which is Councillor Waters. So, Councillor Waters, if you can hear me, you've got 3 minutes and start whenever you're ready. Okay. If you just press *6, Councillor Waters, I think you're muted at the minute.
Can you hear me?
I can, Mark, go ahead.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. The first part of this is a question to you as Executive Member for Economy and Strategic Planning, and that's why is this matter in front of you? These are predominantly highways matters. In terms of the very critical 19th of May 2021 Local Government Ombudsman report that found fault in this Council's record keeping in relation to highway extent records and issued instructions for certain actions to be completed by the end of this financial year, can there be a better example of an ongoing farce than the situation around the Hull Road green space in this agenda? Note I use the term green space, as clearly from the report this land is not considered by this council as part of the public highway, so cannot be called Verges any longer. Verges, of course, are functional parts of the highway. I don't see how you, as Executive Member, can make any decision on this matter today. The first thing that needs to happen is a full appraisal of Annex A being delivered with a covering letter to all frontagers living on Hull Road, who it appears own this green space, and not to progress, as is suggested, with obscure formal notices posted in the street relating to the adoption of areas of private land. Most won't understand what's going on, or that York Council intend to appropriate their land to cover up the authority's actions installing unlawful infrastructure, and what the council are now saying is private land. Residents should be sent the requested information, have time to consider the implications, and if necessary consult with their legal advisors prior to the publication of the Section 228 adoption notices. I'd suggest giving fully informed residents 2 months to consider the matter before formal notices are posted, possibly in June. Because, of course, there's a lot to consider. Not only the potential loss of private land, which will have value to property owners, the absence all these years of council and utility infrastructure way-leave agreements and therefore payments to landowners, and of course future maintenance arrangements. So in terms of the options available to you, in paragraph 13 there needs to be an option C, and that would be to approve a period of full information sharing with the residents affected by this matter for a period of 2 months pending return of this agenda item to a joint decision session of this Executive Member and the Executive Member for Transport and Highways. I hope that's clear what I'm requesting on behalf of the residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I'll pick up on some of those points when we move on to that item. Our next speakers are in person, so Gwen Swinburne is speaking on the same item. And whenever you're ready, Gwen.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't spoken with Councillor Waters about this, but similar comments. Councillor Mason, I've written to you in detail over this Hull Road Farrago. It should, as a minimum, be a joint decision between and because Mr. Ferris has dumped it on you, you won't have an idea of the difficulties the staff have made for themselves in trying to cover up a series of unlawful actions and expenditure by their predecessors. Instead of coming clean with you, they have sought to obfuscate and confuse by trying to engage a piece of arcane legislation designed for different purposes entirely. They have not given you the full or proper legal position, nor offered options that would include offering owners of land being requisitioned by them some lawful compensation. I am tired of these staff not giving members or us the full story. That means being honest with all parties, you as decision maker, the landowners whose land has been unlawfully built upon and now unlawfully requisitioned, and us, the hapless taxpayer, paying for all these cover-ups and unlawful decisions. I have asked that you defer this report for proper legal advice on all the legal options, and particularly to honestly approach the landowners to compensate them for CYC unlawfully building on it. Finally, councillor, as a York Outer councillor, you may be unaware of the challenges we face to even get grass cut in the inner wards. It was very high last year in parts of Clarence Gardens before we finally got the grass cut by volunteers. You can imagine my shock that meanwhile off Hull Road, again in the outer wards, residents' private grassed areas are being mowed at public expense under some general competency. That, as we know, does not apply to Guildhall Ward. Councillor, please defer your decision for full proper reports and consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. And our last speaker in person is Ben Rich, who's speaking on item 5. You've got 3 minutes, Ben, so just go and we'll give you a warning when you get to the end.
So thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain our plans for the Big Tent Ideas Festival, which we're excited to be hosting in York in June. We welcome the support of York Minster, JRF, Aviva, the Design Council, York Bid, and I very much hope the Council. Big Tent is about stimulating regeneration and supporting left behind communities. We do this by providing a platform for those outside the Westminster bubble and beyond the usual suspects to showcase the innovation, creative thinking, opportunities and challenges which could transform our communities. We are a registered charity set up by Science Minister George Freeman and Tony Blair's former head of office, Baroness Morgan, to be an independent, non-partisan space for constructive political engagement and civil disagreement. Our festival is very informal, with mixtures of panel discussions, discovery tours, and interactive events designed to create opportunities for York residents and visitors to engage with senior policymakers across the political spectrum. That is why we're delighted this year to have already confirmed speakers including George Freeman, Stephen Kinnock, Shadow Levelling Up Minister Sarah Owen, and local MPs Julian Sturdy and Rachel Maskell. As we have always done, we also look forward to including speakers from the main parties on the local council. To this end, I've met with both councillors Afston and Douglas to engage their support, but obviously we await the outcome of the local elections before we can confirm any invitations. We place huge value on simply bringing people from different political viewpoints together to talk constructively and positively. Nevertheless, we also aim to leave a practical legacy, attracting inward investment, increasing volunteering, and providing a platform to influence political thinking to the benefit of the host city. To this end, this year, we are working with JRF to develop a stream of programming to look at reducing long-term poverty, working with the developers of York Central and York Riverside to promote models for sustainable growth, ensuring platforms for local people through, in particular, our Speakers Corner and Art Hall, which are open to all, working with York and North Yorkshire Growth Hub to bring new investment to York businesses, last year having generated £70,000 for Bristol businesses. We've arranged for York's refugee communities to explain their experiences of York immigration policy, good and bad, UK immigration policy, good and bad, directly to politicians with responsibility in this area. We're bringing new ideas for York anti-racism strategy. We're providing a community fair for local voluntary groups to engage new clients, volunteers and users. And for the first time ever, with the support of the council and others, I hope, we will be providing tickets free to all York residents. In conclusion, we're proud of what we're doing and incredibly grateful that the council is considering supporting our work. And I'm sure you share my excitement, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ben, and we'll talk about that item when we come to item 5 on the agenda. Thank you. Right, so item 4, Hull Road Verges. So I think James is going to give us an introduction, and then Helen will take over some of the more detailed bits. And hopefully, you've obviously heard what's been said. If you can pick up on some of those points.
Yeah, certainly. So I think the rationale for it coming to you is there is a proposed officer decision, which is Annex A to the report. But to make that decision, we need to determine the planning authority's position as regards whether these bits of land are within the curtilage of the property. So that's why it's come to yourself as a decision session rather than Councillor de Gorn in terms of the enablement of that officer decision. The second sort of point I would make is that we have had very detailed legal advice on this. We've actually had some external advice about how we resolve this problem given where we're at today, and all of that is contained within Annex A. So Annex A contains a lot of that detailed legal advice.
So my name is Verges. I'm the Traffic and Highway Manager for City of York Council. Yes, so really this is to clarify. So the decision from the local government ombudsman that Councillor Walters referred to has meant that we've put actions in place which include having now a staff resource to try and update the highway extent map and the records. And obviously, as we do this, there are areas that we will have to correct, where we will have to correct our records. And this is part of what we're doing here. We've realized that there are part of highway, so where there's, which are highlighted on the plans, where there are cycle routes, etc., which are not currently on our records. The legal position is very much that they are highway, but they've not been adopted. And this is what the director decision seeks to do. And so, yes, we are asking you to confirm the position of the authority in terms of planning to then enable the director to make the decision. On the points raised, letters to residents, and that is actually part of what we're proposing to do. It's written in the director decision. As we serve notice on the street, we will also write to the frontagers at the same time so that they're aware of this. They have a right to object to the process. So if they do not agree with what we're doing, they can object and we can discuss the issues with them. We can decide whether to take this further under Section 228 or another process. But obviously, we can't decide this until we've actually served the notice and heard what the landowners have to say on this issue. So yes, and Section 228, I think, of the Highways Act is very much a piece of legislation that is made for these issues where there are highways, but they've not always been included in the records for historical reasons, really.
Okay. And in terms of the planning authority's view, that is literally just kind of confirming those two bits of legislation about what the planning authority would deem it as if it was going to be developed.
Yes, so and my understanding is that if we considered it within the curtilage, it wouldn't be a change of use if people started to park on there. But because we consider it not part of the curtilage, it would require a planning change of use for people to convert that land into a parking area.
Okay. And obviously, Councillor Waters picked up on a few things, I suppose, historic things, but the way levers and where people have developed on it, or where there's infrastructure. I suppose is there any mechanism that should have gone through, or is it just historically at that time they thought it was council land? Or
well, I can't answer for a utility really. I think it's probably our response. Okay. If utilities have put cables through there, they would have checked our website, see whether it's adopted highway, and it doesn't show as adopted highway. So it's not an error. It's their issue to resolve.
Okay. And I suppose you obviously picked up on the fact about the appeal right. So we write to them, or once, I suppose this is not my decision, but once Neil makes his decision at that point, then you'll write to them all, and it only needs one single objector to tip it to the point where it be independently looked at outside of the council.
That's it, yeah.
Okay. And maybe it isn't one for this, but is there a negotiation process during that point, or is it always that the council's view is that, and it's someone else will make the decision ultimately?
I think the process, obviously, we would need to seek legal advice if we received some objections, but the process is very much we could either as a council decide that we will take it to magistrates and the magistrates will make the decision, or we could seek to negotiate with the landowners and get to an agreement, but we would seek legal advice at that point.
Okay. Okay, I'll just pull the paper back up to look at the specific wording of the recommendation. Okay, so in terms of the first recommendation, which is obviously basically approving the planning authority's view of that land and how it should be used from a planning perspective, then I'm happy to do that. And obviously then item 2, noting the draft director's decision, which obviously does say about letters going to every property. And given it's such a short space, I don't know if there's anything extra we can do in terms of that engagement to really make sure people understand, because I'm sure it's, for me reading it, it's relatively complicated and technical. So I'm sure it's not binding, but if we could do more in terms of that physical engagement with the people physically delivering those letters and talking to them, I think that would be appropriate if we could.
We can certainly make sure we can certainly make sure when we deliver those letters, we do something about a telephone call or something so that people can ask what it means in practice.
Okay. Well, on that basis, it's just noting the planning authority's position on the land, and I'm happy to approve that and obviously note the decision. Okay. Oh yeah, Gwen, just wait a second. We're just going to let you out. Thanks, Helen. Yeah, they'll let you out. They'll let you out. Brill, and that takes us on to item 5, which is the Inclusive Growth Fund final allocations and update. Simon, over to you to talk us through that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ison. Very pleased to bring you the final report on the Inclusive Growth Fund, fund that we've had in place since September 2019. We've been making a series of slow investments over the last 3.5 years on inclusive growth. I won't go through each of the 8 items in detail. They are covered in the report, and there are lots of references to places where other reports have come back. It's very hard to quantify exactly what the impact of all this work has been, but really pleased to see the Poverty Truth Commission getting off the ground and to see that beginning to influence policy decisions elsewhere in the city, whether that's the Roundtree Foundation's New Constellations work, looking at the voices of people experiencing poverty in York or elsewhere. And note that the launch of that Poverty Truth Commission happened a couple of weeks ago, so it's good to get that off the ground. The community hubs have been a really important part of our community infrastructure throughout COVID, and a real building block for all sorts of approaches across the council through the communities and public health teams. And I'm pleased to have some input from economic development into that as well. Our work with the communities where those hubs are is important and is reflected in some of the other things in the fund. And we'll come back to the greening the retail estate funds, but the research that we funded through that with the Institute of Employment Research in Warwick is informing the Office for National Statistics approach to measuring green jobs, and I think gives us a really helpful and inclusive definition of green jobs, which can help influence how economic development supports the whole climate change agenda, particularly in terms of developing green jobs. On community job fairs, the next community job fair is tomorrow at the Rowe Institute. I'm pleased to see that those community job fairs are going to keep running through to 2025 with the support that you've enabled through this fund. On the Independent Retail Growth Fund, there's a detailed appendix to this report which summarises all the great things that those traders groups have achieved with all the money. Lots of really positive stories about how we've been able to help those really important businesses, key part of our local economy, that have too often been overlooked by in terms of business support and help because of the sectors they're in and because of the scale of those businesses. It's been an important part of our approach to inclusive growth to work with small micro businesses that have previously been overlooked. And on mental health and well-being, work really ongoing at the moment with York Mind and with York St John. About 60 people have been helped so far using the money that's been provided under this strand, and there's a whole coaching offer which has just been launched by York St John. So really pleased we were able to do work on that, and interesting to see that whole piece around the mental health of small business owners becoming a real live issue. I saw Lloyds Bank talking about what they're about to start doing. It was part of it was mentioned in the budget as well. So good to see the government picking up on the importance of mental health as an economic issue too. The economic strategy and partnership work that we've done has supported very wide engagement across the city around the economic partnership, and I think given us a really good strong position for our for the economic partnership to take the strategy forward. So yeah, really pleased with everything that's been achieved with that funding. There does remain £50,000, as we said, due to some of the challenges in terms of the greening retail state money, and I know you've had a proposal from Ben that we've heard about earlier on. So our recommendation is that you consider whether you think that's appropriate to fund from with the remaining funds from the fund. If it's not allocated to that, the money would be used to support pressures elsewhere in the council budget in the current year. So yes, I think we can look back on the Inclusive Growth Fund and feel that a lot has been achieved. We've attempted to summarise it here in this document, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I think, like a lot of things actually with the council, we have these humongous budgets, and actually we forget how much small amounts of money like this can make such a big difference, whether it's, like you said, bits of money to fund the jobs fairs, or little grants of hundreds and thousands of pounds to traders associations. And I think this particular fund has been a really good example of how we can have a lot of impact with quite a relatively small amount of money. Obviously I've read the details around the Big Tent Festival, and in terms of how that meets the kind of more wider inclusive growth and the ambitions that we've been trying to achieve. And I think there's no problem with allocating that money towards that. I think it's a really worthy endeavour and hopefully a real success, and does give us a legacy like some of these other projects we've funded. So just looking at what the official wording is of the recommendation. So obviously noting the progress, which I think I've said is very impressive, and I think a great example of how we can use small grants. And then obviously the second one is considering the final allocation of the money. Some of that will go to Big Tent, and then obviously the rest of it will go back to the council's wider budget pressures. So I'm happy on that basis to approve that allocation, obviously to the Big Tent Festival, and then obviously the remainder going back into kind of the council's general reserves. Thank you very much. Item 6, urgent business, nothing that I'm aware of. So on that basis, I shall close the meeting there. So thank you all for your attendance.